There are many forms of this plant, and the old form that you used to see everywhere would have relatively small clusters of flowers, and this form is one they call Gold Star. It is a select form. Greg Grant found it growing, I don't even remember where, but found it growing several years ago. They started propagating it from cuttings. When you grow things from cuttings, with the exception of only a handful of plants, the offspring will come out looking exactly like the parent. So if you want the biggest and showiest bright yellow Esperanza, always look for Gold Star. Now people always tell me, mine's making seed pods, can I plant the seeds? Sure, you can plant the seeds if you want to, but chances are the seeds, the plants that grow from seed, are not going to be as good as the parent plant in this case, because this is just a really superior form of yellow Esperanza. And if you want to propagate it, it propagates easily from cuttings. No reason to think you're going to save money or anything growing it from seed. So just discard these things. I know it's a lot of fun. You see a seed pod, something in a true gardener says, man, I got to plant seed and see if it'll grow. Well, if you grow it, throw it away before you plant it in the ground, because it's probably not going to be as good as the parent plant. But the Esperanza the Gold Star Esperanza is just a real champion as far as having something big and colorful that will give you flowers all summer long. There is an orange form of this, which also it's a select form they call Orange Star. Doesn't get as big as the yellow, but its flowers are about the same color as this little profusion zinnia, and it's a beautiful thing. Probably the main complaint I've had about that plant is it just gets too big. There are a lot of people with small yards that say, I love Esperanza, but I don't have a spot that's big enough for it. Well, there's some new varieties coming out that look like they're going to be a little bit more compact, and some of the color is slightly different. There's a yellow one that has a little bit more red in the throat, and then there's one that's a little bit more of an orangey apricot-y color. Brand new, first time I found it was about 6 weeks ago, so can't say we've had a lot of experience with it, but it's called Sienna Apricot. And it looks like it's going to be a much more compact grower and have a slightly more, I guess I'd say butterscotch colored flower to it. But I don't think you go wrong with Esperanza if you're just looking for something that gives you lots and lots of color. Yes, ma'am?
Mine has no blooms and lots of aphids. I've been spraying it with a hard stream of water. I heard you say that on the radio.
Yeah, wash the aphids off.
And the aphids keep coming back, keep coming back.
It's stressed one way or another. If it has aphids, it's stressed. It may be a water issue, or it may be a nutrient issue. Fertilize a little more heavily. Is it out in full sun? Okay, you hesitated a little bit. Usually if you hesitate,
Yeah.
it means, okay,
No.
I would fertilize it a little more, I'd water it a little bit more. And if it doesn't bloom, it probably wasn't Gold Star. Pull it up and get rid of it. We're probably going to pull up the one on the front corner of our parking lot. It was sold to us as Gold Star, and I don't think it is, because it's not very much in bloom now. And, you know, we're having some that are in full bloom. So if it doesn't cooperate, sometimes just merely threatening it, showing it that we're going to share it with a shovel, will make it come into
In
bloom.
what time frame? A couple of weeks or a month?
This is 1st of June. I'd give it about 3 weeks. And if it doesn't cooperate, put it on the compost pile. Okay, so Esperanza is a great choice. The plant, everybody calls it Pride of Barbados because nobody can say Caesalopenia, but this is a neat plant. There is a native form, and a lot of people use the term Pride of Barbados, and they also call it Mexican Bird of Paradise, and like I say, botanical name is Caesalopenia, but those names are not totally interchangeable, because the original Mexican Bird of Paradise, original Caesalopenia, the flowers are not super showy, and the stems are very, very spiny. And the blooms are sort of a combination of green and yellow and pink. And they are definitely interesting, but they are not absolutely spectacular. About 4 or 5 years ago, a variety of this, and I'm not sure who found it, but someone found a variety of this Caesalopenia in the southern Caribbean. Interesting place, the island of Barbados, if you've ever been there. It's on the way to St. Vincent, which is a neat place. But anyway, found a variety of this that was a brilliant orange and yellow combination and started propagating it, and it propagates, comes true from seed now. But the most common thing when people say bird of paradise, What they're usually meaning is the variety that we call the Pride of Barbados, which is the one that you see blooming around town that is just the brilliant color, orange and yellow are the predominant colors in the flower. And there's no such thing as a place that's too hot, too sunny, too bright for that plant. If you got a sunny landscape, it should be very much should be a part of that landscape. Now, this year, for the first time, there are a limited number available of a new form of this plant, which is a pure, bright, golden yellow. We had a few a couple of years ago that were kind of a faded yellow, but the guys down at the San Antonio Botanical Garden, through selectively propagating from seed, selecting seed from the ones that were yellower and yellower and yellower, they've come out with a strain that is pretty much guaranteed to come out beautiful golden yellow and bloom as heavily as the more orangey form does. And you have a couple of sources on them. Yeah, this is one of the yellow ones. You'll see that the blue or the leaves on the yellow ones will be more of a green color, whereas if you go out and look at the orangey ones, they'll be a much darker reddish green in color. But San Antonio Botanical Garden is propagating and selling the pure yellow form. If you go to any of the Botanical Society's plant sales, you can get the pure yellow form of the Pride of Barbados, or because we have a very good working relationship with the San Antonio Botanical Gardens and we donate large quantities of material to them, they've allowed us to buy the plants from them, and so we do have some of the pure yellow Pride of Barbados to sell as well. But you're not going to see a lot of them around, and if you want a spectacular plant that you're probably going to be the first in the neighborhood to have, it's a real good plant to buy and plant because it's outstanding. Yes, sir.
How does this differ from Poinciana?
Poinciana is another common name for the same thing. Poinciana is again, it's kind of like, it's kind of like calling that plant Wandering Jew or calling this other one Creeping Charlie. There are about 10 different plants that have the same common name, and there are a number of different forms of Caesalopenia and actually 2 or 3 different species that are commonly called Poinciana. But that's another name that, it's sometimes used interchangeably. But, yes, sir.
How wide and how tall do they get?
On average, depending on whether they freeze back or not, you're going to see some tall ones this year because not all of them froze back. Most years they freeze back to the ground and then they grow about 5 feet tall through a growing season. This year you may see some that are 8 or 9 feet tall. But most years, you can prune them if you want to, but anytime you prune on them, you're reducing flowers. So I just try to plant them in an area you can let them grow tall if you can.
Just mild pruning.
Limited mild pruning. And if yours are like mine, I live in the hill country. Mine froze back even, this winter when it was much milder in town, and many of them didn't. But the first year I planted 2 of them. I've got 2 of them planted on the end of one flower bed. They were basically sticks that came up with a few heads of bright flowers. They froze down to the ground. Last year when they came out with like 3 or 4 little stems coming off of each plant that were fuller and thicker and had more flowers. This year, in an area this big around, there must be 25, stems coming up out of that. So as they get bigger and better established, they just keep coming back fuller and thicker. And if I don't get any of the hail that Comfort and that area had, hopefully they'll be spectacular this summer. But they're neat plants, and again, I think really should be a part of just about any sunny landscape. Now, oh golly, it's hard to know. There are just so many wonderful things. The ornamental grasses, these are also great things to use in a sunny landscape, and brings up a point I wanted to talk about briefly, in that everybody knows that the green pigment in a leaf is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll requires sunlight to form, but it is also broken down by sunlight, at least to some degree. That's why when you pick up that bag of fertilizer that you left lying on the yard and forgot about, and all the new grass underneath it is white, it's white because it hadn't had the sun to convert what we call prochlorophyll A into chlorophyll and get the green color. The plant is constantly building new chlorophyll, and the sunlight is constantly breaking the green color down. That's one reason that in the fall things tend to get a more red-purple color to them. It's not necessarily that they're producing more of those pigments, but all of a sudden the chlorophyll production is slowed down, the sun is bleaching the green out, and all these purples and reds are showing through. Your plants with colorful foliage, whether it's this purple fountain grass, whether it's the burgundy blast laura petalum, things like that will become much more intensely colored in bright sun than they do in a shadier spot. And the reason for that is the sun is bleaching the green pigment out and letting the brighter colors show through.